Thanks, Donna. Thank you for having me here today. I'm actually really excited to be here. Now, some of you do know me from the past, and I want to just tell you that I'm very good at throwing out numbers to people, and I'm going to throw my first number out now, 2. And my number 2 is that in the last 5 years, I've had 2 counsellors fall asleep and audibly snore when I'm presenting to them. It's a big room. We might build on that today. Look, recently I was conducting some visioning workshops for one of the new merged councils, and it's one of those sessions where you get residents sitting down, they're talking about the aspirations for the future, what their goals are, and then you see someone there and you go, oh dear, he's not getting it. There was an older gentleman there, he was basically, if we could term him anything, it'd be glass half empty. Now, the people in the session were all working around, we were talking about what are the goals for the future, and I was watching, and I'm going to call him Ted, and I've checked that, there's only one Ted here and they're completely different people. And I was watching him and I suddenly realised here's a really good example of confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is where you hear what you hear because you're hearing it from certain people. And with Ted, he was very negative. And I was at the stage when I was walking over to Ted to say, we're looking for the future, let's focus on positivity, we've got to find where we're going. When and a lady at the table just turned to Ted and said something along the lines of, I know you've got a lot of things that sounds like you're unhappy about, but we're all here to work to make things better. And the fascinating thing was Ted's face sort of just stopped. He looked around the table and he saw everyone nodding, and he suddenly realised he was not speaking to a converted choir. They all had different perceptions. And I think sometimes the Teds of this world are the ones that you hear about community perceptions of how you're performing. And simply put, they are not representative of the broader community. And I've got demonstrated proof for that today. So let's get straight into it. As Donna outlined before, wrong way. Good, yes, thanks. Okay, so today I want to outline what are the community's perceptions of local government, what are their priorities, and I want to understand or get a measure of what they want to see the local government's doing for them. So to look at this in detail, we're going to look at where are we now, where do the communities want us to be, and how do we meet those? How do we make those align? To give you a little bit of background, in 2011 there was quite a lot of talk in category about local government branding and image. And I'm not talking fancy colours, I'm not talking logos and that. I'm talking about the image and perception it had in the broader community. So much so that in 2012 I decided to do our own statewide survey of New South Wales to look at what are the drivers that contribute most to local government image. And when we did that, we conducted the survey across New South Wales, and we found that the top 3 things, or top 3 contributors were responsiveness, no-brainer, competence, yeah, and listening. The interesting thing about this was that if you are a well-regarded council, you will be rated highly by your residents on these measures. And the inverse, of course, is true as well. But when we actually collated these down together, when we pulled them together, we looked at common clusters, and we found a sort of an interesting story. And that was that if you cluster them up, what we can see is that while performance measures account for nearly 45% of people's image of their local government performance, it is the values and the visions of the organisation as communicated by councillors and council staff that are significant contributors to the way people perceive the way you're performing. So it's not just what you're achieving, it's the process for which you pull people along with you on the journey and the way you do it. So, and this is still true today. Okay, let's fast forward now to 2017. If anything, simply put, it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride since 2012. Confucian curse is, may you live in interesting times. It's been a really interesting journey. So when we were asked by local government New South Wales to collect a baseline measure, we were excited for a couple of reasons. First, because it's a space we do a lot of work in, so we're very passionate about it, but also because we knew we had 2012 data. And I could actually now go, well, what has happened? What has a campaign of broken clocks, media noise, the whole merger thing, what's it done to the community's perceptions? And that's what we were going to do. So what we did as a first step is we looked beyond the research we'd done in the past. We looked at some white papers, we did some due diligence to look at other dimensions to make sure we were capturing a fuller picture. And obviously it was a far more comprehensive survey that LGNSW commissioned for us, or commissioned with us. So through all this, we decided that we needed to understand a couple of key things. So we wanted to ask the community, how satisfied are you with local government? How satisfied are you with your local council? What is the image that the organisations have within the broader community? Trust, I mean, I've heard it splashed around a few times today. The visions people have. And then it became a little bit more about what are the priorities for the future? How do people see services and facilities? How do they think these should be funded? And finally, the process of engagement, again, has been a topic that's come up a few times today. What sort of engagement are people looking for? What works? So how do we collect the answers? Well, simply put, we did a survey of 1,000 residents across New South Wales. We conducted research in every single LGA in New South Wales, so 128 LGAs. This benchmark is a very robust measure of the community's perceptions. So basically, it's got an error rate of plus or minus 3%. So we're very confident with these results. It's a massive poll. So essentially, we have some really robust information that we can drill down on and we can compare against 2012. So what do we find out? Well, I'm going to talk about jump forward. I'm going to talk about the majority findings. So first of all, one of the key majority findings was that 75% of your residents feel that you are best placed to inform local decision making. You understand what the community need, you're close to it, they want you in that role. Here's another one, 82, the next number is 82. 82% of residents are at least somewhat satisfied with local government performance, so with their local council performance. And when we did this 2 years ago, our top two box, satisfied, very satisfied, was 50%. That's now gone to 55%. That's a significant improvement over time. So essentially, after 5 years of all this noise, people are more satisfied with you. Is that a surprise? Well, it's true. Okay, and look, I see this all the time. This is not a surprising piece of information. I've had councils that 96% of people are somewhat satisfied with their performance. So that's where you can get to. Okay, now, remember Ted? So Ted, there's another number, the next number is 6. 6%. 6% of residents are not at all satisfied with their council's performance. 6%. That's it, 6%. Does someone want to ask me how big 6% is? How big is 6%? Well, I'm glad you asked, because in a poll conducted in America in 2014 by a Gallup poll, that essentially 6% of Americans believe that the moon landing was faked. And I know that looks like Saturn. It's my little in-joke. All right. Next fact. 61% of residents say that councils have a good to excellent image in the community. That's a good result, but obviously there's still room to improve on that. I mean, we've had a 61% poll recently come through, and that was considered a landslide, remember. All right. Now, I want to now talk about something we've seen from the other research we conduct, and I'm going to call it importance creep. And the reason why I'm going to call it importance creep is that over time, We conduct surveys with some councils every year, some councils every couple of years, some every 4. We're sort of seeing a lot of the services, the facilities and the infrastructure you're providing is becoming more important just gradually over time. Now, I can't say exactly what's driving that. Maybe it's the spotlight on a category has made people realise that, hey, they're doing a good job. They're doing things that are important to my future. Maybe it's just that people are valuing services more. But anyway, it can be quite disparate services. I've seen childcare, illegal rubbish dumping, environmental sustainability, roads, managing revitalisation of town centres. They're all becoming more important. Now, also from the LGNSW study, we found that we've seen some other significant improvements in terms of performance measures such as service, value for money, and infrastructure. We've seen strengthening across other measures, financial management, competence. The opportunity areas, the ones that have the lowest level of ratings that are still sort of improved, but really we need to work on, are listening, informing, and transparency. Okay, so that's where we are now. Let's talk about what the community needs. Now, the interesting thing about communities, if you ask someone a question, the first thing they're ever going to say is roads. They just do, but that's a sort of a knee-jerk response to things. But what we've found is when we spoke to the different councils, we've cut the data by smaller to medium and then large councils. So what we found for the smaller to medium councils, it's all about economic development. It's all about keeping those towns and villages vibrant. It's about jobs for myself. It's about jobs for my kids. It's about having more than one shop so not everyone's wearing the same t-shirt. It's essentially about nurturing the towns and villages and keeping the communities vibrant and alive. And more too, we can see that access to quality services is important because out in our regional areas, there is no one else offering these services, so somebody has to be there, and that's local government. When we talk about our larger metropolitan councils, well, on this, the clear priority is roads, but it's not really the condition of the roads, unless you mean by that the condition of being parked on a main arterial road on the way going to work, commuting during peak hour. That's the main issue. The real issue here, when you drill down with residents, it is all about the fact that they do not feel the infrastructure is coping with the current weight of demand. It's not cutting it. You know, residents associate the D word, development. It's associated with overpopulation, poor planning, and poor execution. The thing here, though, is that balanced growth is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. For everyone who says a blanket no to no more development, there's somebody else who realises that it's inevitable and that it has to be sympathetic to an area and it has to solve a whole range of different housing needs. Incidentally, we've been talking to a lot of people since the May study we conducted for LGNSW, and with the announcement of IHAPs in August, with Sydney and Melbourne Council, Sydney and Wollongong councils needing to go to the IHAPs to guard against corruption and lead to better local planning, which is the quote. Residents see that as just a dismissal of local inputs. They don't see it, they do not see it in those terms as being a solution. Residents are also obviously concerned about schools, health centres, the erosion of green space. What we're seeing is that residents understand that development is going to happen, but they want to be consulted so they can help shape it. And I think you already know that. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to show you them at my next slide now. Now, trust. This is an interesting one. This is from our online poll we conducted with our panel. So the actual scores, it's not them that I really want to focus on, it's the relativities there. And the relativities show that there's a lot more trust that local government will act in a somewhat trustworthy way to act in the best interests of the community compared to the state. Ultimately, development is an all-of-government challenge, but your communities want your stewardship, your advocacy, and you to be empowered enough to make sure you can shape those decisions to make sure they align with the community's needs. The communities want better outcomes, and it's not just about development. At a granular level, people want better quality services, they want better quality infrastructure, they want better quality assets. Now, we do a lot of work in the SRV space, and at the moment, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar or have gone for one recently. IPART's essentially got 3 levels you go for. It's rate peg only and things fall apart. There's maintain, and you pay more, or there is improve and you pay even more. And based on about 40 different surveys we've done over the last 5 years, essentially I can split that into 3, the way people answer that into 3 ways. 33% don't even want to pay the rate peg, and Ted's one of those guys. 33% will agree to pay more if you can at least maintain the current quality of the services you're providing. And the last 33% will agree to pay even more to get a better quality outcome. The communities sort of understand, if you sit down and talk in focus groups with them, that if you want to have better outcomes, somebody's got to pay for them, and they know that some of that is going to fall onto them. In the LGNSW study, we asked a specific question, thinking of the quality of services, facilities and infrastructure in your local area, how supportive would you be to pay more via rates and charges? Now, it's not quite conclusive. I mean, it's just under 75% said at least somewhat supportive. So, of course, it's conclusive. And the younger the residents are, the higher the levels of support they would have for this. The challenge for you is to recognise that you're more likely to be blindsided by a minority group that is concerned, and for valid reasons, with pensions and fixed incomes and that, understandably, but you're more likely to be blindsided by them into what the people's perceptions are than the actual broader community which will support it. So that comes to the next stage, which, how do we meet the community needs? Right, I'll just have a sip of water if you don't mind. I've been talking too much. Okay, so the final piece of analysis I'm going to be talking to you about here is in the last 8 years or so, we've done hundreds of these community satisfaction surveys, and we've decided to draw down on the relevant data. So we're actually partnering with LGNSW and Bang the Table to do a white paper to actually identify clearly the drivers of best practice community satisfaction, how to drive community satisfaction. And the final analysis will include several million data points and over 100,000 resident inputs. Our data set, and if you can see, these are the areas it includes, because they're all the council spaces that we've done research for in the last 8 years. It includes regional and metropolitan councils, coastal and inland, wealthy, poorer, large, small, high density, low density, high population, low population, high level of home ownership, low level of home ownership. And the 2 things we've already determined from this is that the 2 most important determinants, I've used 2 again, sorry, are council responsiveness and financial management. No surprise, nobody likes to feel ignored, and everyone wants to feel that resources are allocated wisely and sensibly. But on further analysis, we could actually see that it breaks down into 4 key theme areas. And these are communication and engagement, which is participation, consultation, responsiveness and information. And if you're in a high socioeconomic LGA, your community want to participate more than anything else. They feel entitled to participate all the time. Also, we then have management and planning, and that's advocacy, development, economic development, financial management and growth. We have condition of the local area, so your parks, your gardens, cleanliness, revitalised CBDs. And then we have roads and traffic, maintaining roads, road safety and traffic. And all subjects I've heard talk about today. The thing is, when we factor this down, communication and engagement is your ace. As a factor in community satisfaction, communication engagement is significantly more important than management and planning, and twice as important as either local area and roads. Because ultimately, it sits across the top of all of them. And that's where you inform your decisions up from. And communication engagement, it's not a newsletter. It's not your website. It is participation, consultation. It's responsiveness, and it's providing that information to your communities. And this is supported by the results of the LGNSW study, where we found that 46% of residents want more information than they're currently receiving. 52% were happy to keep it as is, and only 2% feel they're being over-informed about what's going on in the local area. So it's safe to say that this sounds like communication's a really critical thing. What does engagement give us then? So if we have a better engagement, what's that going to provide? Well, I've got a case study for you, and this is a case study which I'm going to call Engage and Be Rewarded. So in 2015, we did an asset management study with Windsor-Carriby Shire Council. And as part of that process, we recruited some 400 residents to take part in the study. Now, what we did was we were sending them an information pack about the quality of their assets and a whole range of different issues. You can see an example here. We show what's good condition, fair or poor condition. We sent this out to them. But as part of the recruitment process, we got an overall satisfaction score. We said, overall, how satisfied are you with your council's performance? And they got 84%. Oh, sorry, 76%. 2 weeks later, after they'd received their information pack, we asked them again, after we asked all the other stuff as well, of course, and it moved to 84%. That is a significant improvement in satisfaction in 2 weeks. And this is something we've observed across many, many research studies. Invariably, the act of engagement improves community satisfaction. Now, I think there's a real challenge here as well. I mean, there is ultimately a piece where we can't have our communities being able to feel that they can act like baby birds waiting for a feed. I mean, they've got a responsibility as well. But I think that there's some ways that you can help make their lives easier. Here's a few places to start. Use simple language. Avoid government jargon and acronyms. You've got a plan to cut through as well. You've got a plan to cut through. Okay, so you've got a plan to cut through because in the end, ultimately, if you don't, it's not going to cut through. I had some comms manager once say to me, we sort of do all this stuff, getting the comms right, and then we just sort of throw it out there. Activate interactions. And you might call this one rubbish engagement, I like to call it that, but as a part of a special rate variation, I know of a council that attached information about the consultation to people's bins. And that sort of thing cuts through a lot more than a rates notice. Any engagement needs to be multimodal. There's no perfect channel, but time and time again, we see that a person-to-person contact is much more effective than a passive web page or a passive newsletter. 56% of the community indicated they want to be involved in more local decision making. And if we can find a way to activate this and make it happen, we're going to get better outcomes for local communities. Another fact from the LGNSW study is that 9% of the community said they would consider or are likely to consider in the future running as councillors. If you're in a council of under 12,000, put your hands up. 26%. Okay. Look, governance, a real consultation and engagement is a driver that changes community perceptions for the better and should achieve better outcomes. Be clear on your goals. And a community engagement framework is critical. If you're just informing, sometimes that's all you're doing. If you're asking for a comment, sometimes you're asking for a comment. But don't ask for inputs if you've already made a decision. At the conclusion of any engagement, you need to contact and acknowledge people's inputs. Give them feedback to those who took part and let them know what the outcome's going to be. Okay, wrapping it up now. When I started writing this speech, I sort of was thinking, wow, here's a piece to tell you that the communities probably perceive you better than you think. And that yes, councils are doing well. 61% say their council has a good to excellent image. But I guess that then raises a question, is that good enough? Shouldn't we strive to do better? to target excellence. Because we're living in a really surprising political climate today where globally and locally, people don't trust the traditional government. People are disengaged and disillusioned. I hear it in every focus group, see it in comments pages, you see it in local papers. I think it's more important than ever now for councils to listen, communicate, and engage in a transparent manner, in a streamlined, easy to understand way that acknowledges the community. It's more important than ever for local government to continue to breed trust and confidence. Your communities, they want a champion, a local champion. They want someone who's in their corner. Thank you very much for your time.